As some of you may already know, D. Grayman is a series that I hold very close to my heart. It's been 2 years since I last talked about D. Grayman, and it's been 4 years since my very first video talking about the series. And I'm beginning to notice a pattern here. It seems that every 2 years that pass, I just so end up talking about D. Grayman. So let's keep the tradition. And when I say keep the tradition, it doesn't mean I'm gonna go on hiatus like the manga. It means that I'm actually gonna make some content on the series, especially since there's been a recent growth in the fandom, and now it seems like people actually care about D. Grayman again. At least I hope that's the case. Anyway, enough of the tomfoolery. Let's get into how amazing the power system of D. Grayman is. Because we all know how anime fans love their power systems. A story? What's that? Character development? What? Alright, I had my fun. The power system of D. Grayman is known as the Innocence, and the Innocence itself plays a huge role into the history and the world building of D. Grayman as a whole, with the Innocence coming from a special material which would be known as the Crystal of God. Its whereabouts and origins are something that is a mystery, and with that being said, this brings another layer to the power system and leads us to the question, what exactly is the true purpose of the Innocence? You see, it is said that the Innocence has been created by an ancient civilization, but we don't know the exact purposes as to why they created it and what the Innocence was truly intended for 7,000 years ago. And for all we know, the Innocence could have been used to bake pies, and we won't know until we get more answers. However, knowing little to nothing about the history of the Innocence and its origins, it's used as the primary source of power in order to kill others. Or more accurately, in order to exorcise Akuma. Naturally, being able to exorcise Akuma isn't an ability that any average Joe can just take the mantle of. In order to wield the Innocence, you have to be chosen by God. It would more or less be your destiny in order to be able to wield such power. If you are simply not chosen, there is not a single possibility for you to be able to use the Innocence as a power source. But if you just so happen to be chosen, you will be known as an accommodator, and these accommodators eventually become exorcists. Now, why does being an accommodator matter when it comes to using the Innocence? This is due to the fact that accommodators are the only people that can actually use the Innocence. These same people would also be known as the Apostles of God. And it only makes sense because these people are said to be chosen by God in order to use this power. And with this statement, this makes the Innocence itself all the more interesting because we don't know what kind of God they are even being chosen by and why exactly God gives them these powers. The Innocence and power system in itself have huge ties to the story, and it makes it all the more compelling. Even so, the Innocence allows accommodators to use anti-Akuma weapons. And these weapons, as the name would suggest, are ultimately used in order to defeat and exorcise the Akuma. These weapons are also the Innocence, which comes in many different shapes, sizes, and forms, with the Innocence taking the shape of Alan's arm, a katana, dark boots, and even your everyday household item. And of course, with so many different possibilities as to how the Innocence can be used, users of the Innocence have to undergo synchronization. Synchronization allows accommodators to use the Innocence and bring out its full potential. By synchronizing with your anti-Akuma weapon, you are able to become stronger than ever before, and this will all be due to your synchronization with your weapon. And this comes through a practice called Synchronization Rate, which is a percentage that dictates how much of a bond you have with the Innocence in order to truly use it through your weapon. The lower your percentage is, it will be more difficult to finally be able to call upon your innocence and use it. Vice versa, if you were to have a higher synchronization rate, you would be able to use a lot more abilities and also have an easier time using the innocence altogether. Unfortunately, this power does come at a risk. If your synchronization rate is at 10% or below, you will undoubtedly become a fallen one. As a fallen one, you are essentially beyond salvation, and you will more than likely take a grotesque form in the shape of innocence. And as I just mentioned, you are beyond saving at that point. There's literally nothing you can do except for let the innocence drain all of your life force, and that's if you don't cause a wake of destruction while you're suffering, just waiting for your own death. In a huge contrast to being a fallen one, you could reach the level of critical point, which is a percentage that reaches the 100% synchronization rate. With 100% being the limit, there's also the possibility to exceed 100%, which quite simply allows things to only get crazier. This could even cause your innocence to change into a completely different form entirely. And that's not all. There are 2 different innocence types in total, or at least these are the ones that are most commonly known of throughout the story, with the 2 types being parasite type and the equipment type. Innocence itself reacts to negative energy, and this does not fall short of negative emotions. Parasite types are connected to the mind of the user, and the innocence will react correspondingly to whatever thoughts are on your mind. And the innocence itself will react to bloodthirstiness, malice, and rage, and even take a new shape. When using a parasite type, the innocence and its user are one. When using this type, if you can think it, you can more or less do it. An equipment type works differently, due to it not having a direct contact between its user and the innocence. Equipment types are made through a forging process rather than coming about through a special circumstance such as a curse or many other methods. With that being said, an equipment type, as ordinary as it may seem, it can evolve into a new type of innocence known as a crystal type. Rather than have an accommodator use an actual item or specific weapon, they begin to use their own blood to make their weapons, which causes the innocence itself to form into any specific weapon that the user desires. And much like the parasite type, it responds to the mind of the user, allowing itself to reach a new level of potential. The innocence comes in many different shapes, sizes, and is so complex that there's still so much more that we have yet to have learned about it, which makes innocence one of the most intriguing aspects of D. Gray Man.